Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Christy, and just right off the top, I want to tell you I think this is a first for me. I don't think I've ever made a video when I've been this sick, so excuse the voice. My husband has pneumonia, and I have bronchitis and like the beginnings of pneumonia, and we're on antibiotics, but they don't really seem like they're helping. So I have been watching the Karen Reed trial while I've been resting and trying to get better. And I decided that I'm just going to kind of group the last 2 weeks worth of testimony into little blocks. And it'll be easier for you to go if you want to see like a certain person that testified. You can just watch one short video instead of one really, really long video. So, excuse the hair, excuse the voice, just bear with me, okay? So week 2 started with day 5, and it was the rest of the Canton PD we're finishing up. So this video is going to be Gallagher, Goode, Lank, and Ray. They are the last of the Canton PD to testify, at least so far. And I just want to say, the more I've been thinking about it, I want justice for John O'Keefe as much as anybody. That being said, convicting the wrong person isn't justice. That would be letting his actual killer or killers get away with something and then making them feel like they're invincible. Now, I'm trying to stay very neutral and take the evidence as it comes, but I think if Karen Reed actually is the one that hit John O'Keefe, it wasn't murder. That's a stretch for me. I don't think the Commonwealth's ever going to get me there to murder. But we're 3 weeks in, getting ready to start week 4 on Tuesday, and I still don't know how he died, what time they think he died. None of that. I know a lot of useful or useless information, but the prosecution just isn't getting into the meat of the case, and I need them to get there. You know, we're getting a lot of times and inconsistencies and just odd little things when you compare testimonies from one witness to the next. But I need to know, why are these specific times important? What time do you think whatever happened to him happened? What cars were there? What cars weren't? Things like that. Okay, you're telling me, but I need to know why I need to know this. I hope that made sense. But if you're telling me that she murdered him, they're saying that she would have had to have pulled forward and gone approximately 62 feet at 24 miles an hour in reverse and hit him. And it's snowing and kind of starting to stick that night. You know, I don't do a reverse well at any speed. You know, I can't keep it straight like for a long distance. 62 feet at 24 miles an hour, I'm not going to be going straight. And how did she know that he wouldn't jump out of the way? You know, and why do it there where people are coming and going, and at an officer's house, a Boston police officer's house? You know, someone could have seen him in the snow and saved him, and then he would have been like, Karen backed into me, and then we'd know. But it doesn't add up. And why go back to look for her alleged victim and then try to do CPR to save his life? I don't know. I don't know, guys. And then she says something to the effect of, I hit him. And we've heard, you know, all different versions of I hit him. Could I have hit him? Did I hit him? I hit him. she was in a panic. So, maybe she convinced herself that she did. I don't know. But if she hit him, I think it was an accident, and I don't think she realized. That's just where I'm at right now with the evidence that I've been given by the Commonwealth. So, after the first week, I feel even more strongly that something entirely different happened that night. And maybe there is corruption in Canton because everybody's connected to everybody. And, I call it the epicenter of bullshit, but everybody seems to be tied to JohnO'Keefe somehow. And I can't get that out of my head. Maybe Karen Reed is really, like the defense said in their opening, maybe she really is just a convenient outsider that's going to take the fall for something more sinister. Maybe they weren't planning to frame Karen Reed. Maybe they were going to say he got hit by another car, a snowplow, whatever. But when she showed up there hysterical, possibly saying, I hit him, they thought, okay, we'll go with that. So, like I said, things aren't really adding up for me yet. We'll see how the rest of the trial plays out, if the Commonwealth can ever get to their point. We have to remember she is innocent until proven guilty. And so far, they haven't proven that to me. I don't know if the Commonwealth can prove it. It's just my opinion. I'm not here to sway you. I'm just going to give you what I have seen and heard. And I want you guys to pop off in the comments and tell me what you think so far. What do you think happened? Do you think she's guilty? And what's pointing you in that direction? Let's have a discussion. Let's be like a jury. Maybe you can change my mind. We'll see. But with all that being said, let's jump in and let's get started with Gallagher. All right. Get my handy dandy notebook here. You guys, I have this thing. I'm going through like notebooks, plural, on this trial. It's crazy. My husband is constantly having to go buy me more notebooks and pens. I run out of ink constantly. So on day 5, JohnO'Keefe's dad wasn't there, and I worry about that man. Every time he's not there, I get so worried. His mom is there every day, but his dad he doesn't look well. And I can't imagine what this is like for him, but every time he's not there, I get so worried, and I always make a note that he's not there. Pretty sure that day 1 of week 2, Aunt Bev is talking about she needs to order coffee. I mean, I think we all need coffee. They start with direct of Paul Gallagher. Sorry, that cough. Okay. So Paul Gallagher has been with the Canton PD for 32 years. He was promoted to lieutenant in 2021 and was previously a detective sergeant. He is in charge of internal affairs. That's kind of convenient. Background checks, patrol, and he oversees the detectives. He got called shortly after 6 a.m. on the 29th from Sergeant Goode, who you see in the picture. He told him that it was a Boston police officer unconscious in the snow. First, he went to Meadows Avenue, which is JohnO'Keefe's address. He got it mixed up when he was getting the information. And then dispatch told him that, no, it's actually at 32 Fairview. It's 34, but he was told 32. So, one discrepancy so far. He went by the Canton PD first to get winter gear because he was responding in his personal vehicle, so he wanted to get like the heavy coat and what have you. He arrived approximately 7 a.m. and John O'Keefe was already gone. The fire department was no longer at the scene. He talked to Sergeant Goode, and Detective Sergeant Lank joined them, and then they decided to process where John O'Keefe was found. Now, remember, he was gone by the time Gallagher got there. He never saw John O'Keefe. So the scene that they're going to process is based on what other people are telling him. It was on the left side, the east side of the property. It was snowing heavily, 4 inches on the ground. Sometimes the wind was blowing north and sometimes it was blowing south because you know how much Lally loves the weather. So Sergeant Goode had reached out to the Norfolk County CPAC unit, and Mr. O'Keefe was still alive, so they didn't respond. They take jurisdiction of unattended death scenes. Since he was still technically alive, he wasn't pronounced at the scene, they weren't going to become involved at that time. So these police officers decide that they're going to process the scene and they're going to use a leaf blower. Officer Goode offered to go get one because he had one at home and he lived close by because it seems like everybody's really close by. So he goes home and he gets his leaf blower. He comes back, he gives it to Gallagher. They took photos of the scene. They moved all the cruisers away from the house. They tried to set up crime scene tape, but it was blowing really wildly in the wind. They said it was serving no purpose because there were no civilians around. What about the people in the house like 30 feet away? What about the neighbors? What if they came? I don't know. But they had 2 officers protecting the scene, so they thought that was good. He said it was a unique scene. He had never processed a scene in the snow before. And he thought the leaf blower would be good because they could use it to remove snow in a controlled manner. So there was a 6-inch, what he called Cape Cod asphalt berm, not exactly a curb, but that's kind of the end of the road, beginning of the lawn. They show him pictures from the scene. It was like 13 photos that were marked for exhibit. It's like a picture of the street looking west, down Fairview, the front of the house, driveway at different angles, third car in the driveway, a picture of the whole house. Let's see. Basically, everything that he's shown everybody else. Then we see a picture of the snow. It's a close-up of where John O'Keefe was found. I showed you that in my last video. They find pink spots, which you see on the slide, and an object that was later ID'd as a broken cocktail glass. The pink spots were coagulated blood in the snow. So there you see what they found. The picture of the snow shows that the scene was trampled by civilians and first responders, but you could still see the pink spots. They didn't see any footprints between the scene and the house. I don't know why that matters, because if this had happened earlier, the snow would have covered any footprints, but, you know, apparently we need to know that. We see the house with the flagpole, the 6-inch Cape Cod asphalt berm, these close-ups of the spots and the glass. They uncovered the berm using their feet. They just kicked the snow off of it. He said that he had reviewed all the dash cam video. He didn't have a dash cam because he was in his personal car, but he's reviewed the other dash cam video. Lally plays. Sheriff's, again, You can see at 7:02 on that video, Sergeant Goode is seen trying to put up the crime scene tape with Mulaney and Lank. He uses a laser pointer to show Mulaney and Goode with the crime scene tape and shows the tape blowing in the wind. Sorry, guys. He didn't set up a tent due to the weather conditions. One of those little canopy, we've seen them, like when they find a body or anything, they'll put those up to kind of protect the area. He said it wouldn't have worked because of the weather. He didn't pick one up at the police department because he actually had one in his car if he would have been able to use it. There was no one to keep out of the scene. It was only officers there, so they took the tape down. Goode took a video of him using the leaf blower, showing the process. We get to watch the leaf blower video. It was just fascinating. He was operating the blower. Lank was documenting. Goode was assisting. The pink spots turned to dark red spots. The cocktail glass is exposed. They got almost to bare ground in a 6x6 area. They didn't observe anything other than blood in the cocktail glass. No neighbors came out. He was there for approximately 45 to 50 minutes and then left to take exhibits to the Canton Police Department. He took 6 blood samples and the cocktail glass. They put the blood in cups and bagged them. Lank placed them into evidence. February 1st, they were turned over to the Massachusetts State Crime Lab at the station. He went back to the station with Lank. Let's see. He went in the house. There's Steve. Sorry. He went into the house with Gallagher. He had got called to go back by Jen McCabe. So he goes back and they walk in the side door, which I'm pointing to, not the main door, the side door. And the people in the kitchen were Jen McCabe, Brian Albert, ATF agent Higgins, and 5 or 6 other people, but he didn't know who they were. He later says that he doesn't recall if Higgins was there at 9 a.m. or not. The crime lab was at the station to help with a search warrant of the vehicle that was in the Sallyport. This is Karen Reed's vehicle in Sallyport 3. You can see it's got crime scene tape around it. He said this is where they bring the prisoners in. There's cameras in the area, but he doesn't know where. They show a video from 9:11 a.m. on February 1st of the Sallyport. He points out Trooper Proctor. There's a criminalist there and a photographer. Eventually, the accident reconstruction team arrives. He used a laser pointer to show him entering the Sallyport. They had trouble removing the taillight, so they called in Officer Brian Wanless because he has tools and experience maintaining the police department's fleet of vehicles. He was called in at about 9:50. He removed the taillight. Let's see. Gallagher secured the parking lot for the reconstruction team. Trooper Proctor won from the reconstruction team, and Gallagher went back to Fairview. He showed them where John O'Keefe was found. Now, remember, he never saw where John O'Keefe was. This is just based on, this is what somebody told me. It was here. That's what we're working with. He didn't draw a diagram of where any evidence was found. They didn't measure from a stationary object, like, say, from that flagpole or from the fire hydrant or whatever that's gonna be there. They didn't measure and say, okay, he was found, 5 foot 4 inches to the left of whatever. No, they just made estimates. And, quote, they don't employ that process in the Canton PD. I'm telling you, in college, I was a pre-med student and I minored in criminology. In my forensics class, we learned how to maintain a crime scene, what needs to be done. I could have done a better job than the Canton PD. You could have done a better job than the Canton PD. All of you. It's scary to think that this is what happened. Okay, so on, where are we at here? The first time he was interviewed, formally interviewed, was with Lally at the DA's office on April 3rd, 2024. Last month. This was 2 years ago. He wasn't interviewed when anything was fresh in his mind. April 3rd, 2024. Let that sink in. He was never interviewed by Trooper Proctor, Trooper, I don't know, I've heard it two different ways, Butnick or Buchanan. Yuri, let's call him Yuri. And no one from the DA's office until April 3rd. He didn't write a report about the day of the event. He didn't take notes. Nothing about what happened at 34 Fairview on January 29th. February 1st, he directed them to where John O'Keefe was found, and he got that information from other officers. Didn't make a diagram of where the blood and the glass were found. They didn't even mark which blood drop went in which cup, but we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. Let's see. And they used plastic cups for temporary evidence containers. Keep that in mind. So Tom Keller is Brian Albert's neighbor who lives, I have a squiggly arrow because they're like across the street, kind of diagonally, but not exactly. So somewhere across the street is Tom Keller. Gallagher contacted him to let him know that he was responding to the scene because Keller was the lieutenant in charge of detectives at the time. Got that? Okay. So, I get my names mixed up all of a sudden. Gallagher, he was the ranking officer on the scene. He told Lank to go and get, here we go. Yes, he was the ranking officer on the scene. Preservation of the scene was his responsibility. He told Lank to go get initial statements from witnesses, including people from inside the house. He knew it was Brian Albert's house. He knew that Lank knew the Alberts. He didn't see a problem with someone who knew them taking their initial statements. He said, quote, no issue at all. He also knew that Lank had gone into the house to talk to them before he tasked him to do so. Okay. I'm just going to leave this here while we catch up. Lieutenant Tully did the interview on April 3rd. He was shown the report on the stand. He says it's the first time he's seen it. The report says he returned to Canton PD to get a tent to preserve the scene. He says, I didn't say that. Lieutenant Tully must have misinterpreted. You'll see that people are misquoted, misinterpreted in a lot of these reports, allegedly. red Solo cups were used. They're temporary plastic evidence containers were red Solo cups. I mean, I can't. I can't. What? Why? Okay. They got them from that neighbor, Keller. He gave them the red Solo cups. They're a mile and a half away from the Canton Police Department, but they're like, hey, go see if Keller has something we can use. Apparently, the reason that they did it this way is because Canton PD does not have any plastic or glass containers. Okay. They didn't think a swab would work for the blood. The cups weren't covered or sealed. They were put in brown paper bags, he said, plural. Not sterile, not forensically stable. Not standard to borrow cups from a neighbor to collect evidence. Like I said, they didn't indicate which drops of blood went into which cup. He says that he didn't see a men's size 12 black shoe, a men's black hat. He didn't see red, clear, or black plastic, not 45 pieces, not even one piece. And yeah. Their evidence bag is a Stop and Shop bag. He said, it doesn't say Canton PD on it, but it looks exactly like their evidence bag. And there's the cups. They're not in individual bags. They're just all in the Stop and Shop grocery bag. He claims that he didn't think that the glass came from inside the house, so he didn't go in the house to search. Of course not, he said, for any matching glass or physical evidence because there was no probable cause. And he didn't ask for consent to search because, again, no probable cause. So, you guys, this is a lot. This is a lot. Just make sure I didn't miss anything, too important here. I think the red Solo cups and the Stop and Shop bag speak for themselves. He talked to Chief Berkowitz at 8 a.m. when he returned to the Canton PD and agreed that Canton PD should be recused from the investigation because the Albert family had a relationship with the Canton PD. Brian Albert, the owner of the house, his brother Kevin, is apparently one of their best detectives at Canton PD. Yet he still went back to Fairview at 9 a.m. They had this conversation at 8 a.m. decide, hey, we should probably recuse ourselves because it doesn't look good. But he went back at 9, accompanying. Jeez, I should not have tried to make this video today. He went with Lank for the interviews. He doesn't know if Lank and Goode took notes at their initial interviews. They didn't record it. He says he has a professional relationship with Brian Albert. He's never socialized with him. He said there were 5 or 6 people there, including Brian Albert and Jen McCabe. He didn't have any notes or recordings, no report. Doesn't know who was inside the house when John was found. Didn't think it was important. Well, I mean, it's 30 feet away from a dying man. Why would it be important to know who was in the house? I don't know. He told Tully that Brian Higgins wasn't there. He knows Brian Higgins really well. They have a social and professional relationship, but he doesn't recall if Brian Higgins was in the house. If you know somebody that well, I would think that's going to stick in your head. Like, hey, yeah, he was there. He was there. I saw him. Apparently not. So he worked the rest of the day at the Canton Police Department. He says that Brian Higgins has keycard access to the station because his ATF satellite office is at their station. Brian Higgins would have access to the Sally Port where the car was. Gallagher handled the cups. Lank collected the samples. They placed it in Lank's vehicle. He didn't take photos inside the house or the individuals in the house. Jen McCabe was the only witness interviewed. He didn't separate her from the other people, and he says he was in the house for about 10 minutes. The car was at the Sally Port from the 29th until the 1st. The entire department had access to it, and that's about 45 people. They didn't photograph the condition of the SUV immediately upon arrival to the Sally Port. The state police are the ones that decided to remove the taillight. He says there really wasn't a conflict of interest, but it appeared so. So Canton PD recused themselves from investigative interviews, but they could participate in other parts of the investigation. But when he went back at 9, wouldn't that have been considered an investigative interview? Maybe? The taillight shattered upon removal. They show him a picture of the broken taillight. He says he doesn't recognize it. He doesn't recall the pieces and parts of the light falling off. He shows him 4 photos taken between the 29th and the 1st, and he enters them as exhibits. Now, we're going to go back here. Do you see I have it up there? Canton PD, Sally Port 3. That's because this evidence bag and these evidence cups of blood, they're on the floor of the Sally Port. And that's where her SUV is. And they're right there. Right by each other. Just a matter of feet away. So he shows him these pictures, and you can see there's like a white rag in the pictures. It's kind of hard to see, but he points it out for him. And that rag is in all of these pictures. So that's kind of a marker to indicate where the pictures were taken so we can figure out how close they were to the car. The bag was a couple feet behind the SUV, unsealed, unsecured, right next to the SUV. This is like a recipe for cross-contamination. He says it's not, but it is. Think about it. If they're saying that they found Brian Higgins, John O'Keefe's DNA there, it could have come from the bag. Somebody could have put some on her car. Easy. I'm not saying that happened, but what I'm saying is, can you prove that it didn't happen? So how can I trust that evidence knowing that it was handled so sloppily? They didn't keep any evidence logs either. That's a little fun fact for you. No evidence logs. They kind of make reference to evidence tampering, but it gets objected to, but it's out there for the jury. I'm so sorry. Let me get a drink. Maybe that'll help. So then Lolly comes up for redirect, and He says that he knew the glass didn't come from the house because he knew they had been out at the Waterfall bar the night before. And no one said he was anywhere but where he was found. There's no cross-contamination in the Sallyport because it was transferred to a criminalist and they put it into their plastic containers. Alan Jackson, my goodness. Ask him if you just take a witness's word that they don't know how he got there and do no further investigating, and he says, of course not. Okay, so that was the end of Gallagher. What do you think about that? I mean, can they be this incompetent? Is this how they normally handle investigations in Canton? I don't know. But the optics are horrible on this one. Horrible. So next up we get Sean Goode. He's been with the Canton PD for 17 years and he's been a sergeant for 3. He's in charge of the patrolmen that are under him. He works dispatch. He has 911 training. And fun fact, they have no civilian dispatchers. I thought that was kind of interesting. So he was working midnight to 8. He was in the dispatch room. And he knows Brian Higgins works for the ATF and has a satellite office at their station. Now, think about this, okay? He saw Brian Higgins come in at some point, approximately 1:30 in the morning, but he didn't talk to him. So, a little before 5 a.m. on January 29th of, it should be 2022, not 2002. Typo, sorry, I'm sick. He gets a call from a woman to see if anyone was picked up or locked up. There was a male out with his friends and didn't come home, and his girlfriend was worried about him. He finds out later that it was Carrie Roberts, and he talked to her at the scene. Later on, they play the 911 call. She asked if they picked up anyone named John O'Keefe. The sound was really garbled on the TV. I am so sorry. And then, let's go. Okay, well, I messed this one up too. At approximately 6:04 a.m., he gets a call from Jen McCabe. And she says, there is a man passed out in the snow, 34 Fairview Road, the Albert residence. Why she felt the need to say that, I don't know. You can hear Karen Reed in the background. She says John is 46 years old. She doesn't know if he's breathing. He dispatched officers, and then he responded to the scene after another officer named Deaver came in and took over dispatch. At one point, when they play the call, you can hear he's asking, like, does anybody know how to do CPR? And she kind of whispers, I think he's gone. I don't know if it's significant, but I wrote it down, so there you go. So he calls Gallagher and Lank. We have to hear about how bad the roads were, of course. And he lets us know that his cruiser, it's the patrol supervisor vehicle, which apparently is 682 is the number of it. It has a watch guard camera system, which has a front camera, a back camera, and a back seat camera. And it also has microphones. And why I think that's important is going to come up way down the road. But just remember that. Microphones, back seat, Goode's car. When the lights are turned on the cruiser, the camera automatically starts to record. They have a flash drive of the stream from car 682. They show the video. We watch this whole drive there. He uses a laser pointer to ID people at the scene, like himself, firefighter McLaughlin, Karen Reed, Officer Seraph, and either Carrie Roberts or Jim McCabe. He wasn't sure. John O'Keefe was in the ambulance when he got on scene. Oh my goodness. I am so sorry. He got a statement from Jim McCabe. He said it was complete chaos. He talked to Karen Reed. He said they had to speak really loud because the wind was howling. He got Karen Reed into his car and he turned the heat on because it was so cold. She was confused, hysterical, in shock, yelling, "Is he dead?" more than once. She said that she didn't know how he got there, that she couldn't keep a train of thought, basically. So he briefed Officer Lank. He talked to Carrie Roberts. The ambulance left, and Karen Reed kept getting out of the car and was like pacing and yelling and just, she's nervous, right? She's anxious. He told Carrie Roberts that they could go home, and she left with Karen Reed in her car. He says moments later, he gets a call that Karen Reed is on the phone with her dad making suicidal statements. He says that her dad wanted her in protective custody. So he told Carrie Roberts to come back to the scene, and that took him approximately 5 minutes. And he told Mulaney to fill out Section 12 paperwork, and that's where it basically is. They're going to make you go to the hospital and be evaluated, like for a psych eval. So the fire department came back. It was the crew from Station 2 this time. He didn't have any more interactions with Karen Reed. Mulaney and Seraph escorted her to the ambulance, and then he noticed that lights go on in 34 Fairview. So he went into the house to interview the homeowners. He had told Jen McCabe, "Hey, go wake him up," because he knew that she was the sister-in-law of Brian Albert, the homeowner. And he's like, "I need to ask him what happened." He was on the scene about 2 hours. He and Lank talked to Brian and Nicole Albert. Jen McCabe was there. He said the conversation in the house lasted 20 to 25 minutes. Huge discrepancies in how long these conversations lasted, where they took place, who was there. You'll notice that throughout. If you're trying to keep score, it's hard. Let's see. He said he knew Brian Albert because he was the brother of Kevin Albert, the detective, who he's worked with for 18 years. Jim McCabe's husband showed up. Lank went in to get a statement with Gallagher, and then he grabbed the crime scene tape and tried to seal off the scene where he was told that John O'Keefe was found. He says, "Hey, I have a leaf blower." When Gallagher is talking about the leaf blower, he's like, "I've got one. I'll go to my house and get it." So he only lives like 5 to 7 minutes away. He goes and he gets his handy dandy leaf blower, and he gives it to Gallagher. He videotapes and takes pictures of this whole leaf blower process with his iPhone. We get to see the video of the leaf blower again. He says the same thing. They found the blood. They found the broken glass. We see video from his dash cam, like when he moved his cruiser. You can see, kind of pans across the yard. We see all the same pictures of the house and everything that everybody else has seen. So I'm just going to skip through that part. Then Yannetti. So sorry. Yannetti does the cross, and this is why this case is such a mess. Just this diagram. My husband's not into true crime, but he knows I've been watching the trial, and he hears about it like every day. And trying to explain who's who and how they're connected, it's so hard. So last night, like, I was making this, and I asked him, like, does this make sense? And he's like, yeah, I think so. But hopefully it will make sense to you. So he grew up in Canton, and he went to Canton Public Schools. He graduated from Canton High in 1998. Courtney Proctor was in his class, and he knew she was Michael Proctor's sister. Michael Proctor is the Massachusetts State Trooper who is the lead investigator in this case, and major sleazebag. Just my opinion. So he knows them, they're connected, they're siblings. Okay. He also had a girl named Jill Daniels in his class. She is now Christopher Albert's sister-in-law. Christopher Albert is Brian Albert's brother. He's married to Julie Daniel, formerly Daniels, who is Jill Daniels' sister. Are you with me still? Okay. The Albert family is really well known in Canton. Chris Albert owns this restaurant called D&E. It's like a pizza sub shop, something like that. He's also a Canton Town Selectman. It's an elected position. He knows, obviously, Kevin Albert because he's a Canton police detective. Kevin is the brother to Chris and Brian. And before Brian Albert owned the house at 34 Fairview, it belonged to his parents. So it's been in their house, in their family forever. He has known Kevin Albert professionally, Chris Albert known personally. He's eaten at D&E Pizza. He's known Kevin Albert for 18 years. Kevin Albert's older than him by approximately 5 years. He's a colleague and a friend. They have hung out socially, and he said that he would protect Kevin Albert in a crisis, and he smirked. You know, they say the devil's in the details, and I've got them. So he shows him a bunch of pages. It's a state police form. It's a analysis and reconstruction report. I think they called it a CARS report, C-A-R-S report. He says he's never seen one. The report says that Sergeant Goode, was the primary investigator on the reconstruction. And he says no. So, I don't know. He said that he knew as of the 29th, the Canton PD had recused themselves. And it was a state police investigation because it was a homicide after John O'Keefe passed away. Sorry, that's my daughter's new puppy, Colby Jack Cheese. Okay, we're going to get through this. I'm not going to die. He says that John O'Keefe's homicide is the first homicide he's been involved with in his 18 years of experience. That's comforting. Now, are you ready for another graphic? Because we got some more connections to make. This one's not as bad, right? Not quite as confusing. So, Brian Higgins works for the ATF, federal agency, and has his satellite office at the Canton PD. Been there for years. Chief Berkowitz, who is Sean Goode's boss, is close friends with... Sorry, the dogs are coming in. He's close friends with Brian Higgins, and that's why Higgins has been allowed to maintain an office there. I'm sorry, this video is just going to hell in a handbasket. Okay, so Higgins has had his office there for years. Chief Berkowitz is a very close friend with Brian Higgins. And like I said, Chief Berkowitz is Sergeant Goode's boss. So when Brian Higgins came to the station at 1:30 a.m., they weren't aware yet that John O'Keefe was potentially laying in Brian Albert's yard dying. He says that his police report says that it was at 34 Fairview, but apparently on the face sheet it says 32 Fairview. I told you we had these address discrepancies. Before we move on, though, I want to point out that Brian Higgins is very close friends with Brian Albert, the homeowner. So there's some more connections for you to try to keep up with. Okay, so the report, the face sheet says 32 Fairview, but he says in the narrative of the report, it says 34. He said he knew that it was Brian Albert's house. You know, we see the picture of the house again. He says that he went in the front door. He has no idea where the basement is. He didn't go down there. We have to watch both dash cam videos again. He said that he never saw Brian Albert come out of the house through 7:50 a.m., which is when he left. He said no one came out except for Jen McCabe and Matt McCabe, her husband. Sergeant Lank didn't ask where John O'Keefe's other shoe was. They didn't ask Brian Albert why he didn't come out of his house. He said that he didn't speak to Kevin Albert, the detective at Canton PD. He said he didn't talk to him that day, but that he has discussed this with him since then, like within a couple of months of it happening. He kind of told him what he saw and what he heard, which I think is probably normal. I mean, I appreciate it when people are like, yeah, we've talked, because when they say they haven't, I'm like, you're full of it. He was the third officer on the scene. He says he was there for like an hour and 40 minutes. He did not hear Karen Reed say, I hit him 4 times. So he didn't include that in that report because he said he never heard those words out of Karen Reed's mouth. He participated in the search for evidence with the leaf blower and the solo cups and the grocery bags. He says the leaf blower worked great. He was really proud of that. They were able to get down to bare ground. He said they didn't find 45 pieces of red, black, or clear taillight. Didn't find a black hat. They didn't find a black size 12 shoe. He's not aware of a crime scene log. He doesn't recall that training at the police academy. Y'all, when I tell you, I lost it. I frequently yell at the TV when I'm watching this trial because we learned about evidence logs, crime scene logs, all of this in your basic forensics class, like your beginner forensics class. You have to keep track of who's coming in and who's coming out of the crime scene, at what time, what are they doing, where are they going. I mean, it's chain of custody thing. And he wasn't trained in that at the police academy. Massachusetts, what are you training your police to do? I have a son and a daughter-in-law that live in Massachusetts, and frankly, I'm kind of worried about them. Anyway, after 2 hours, there was no one guarding the scene. Anybody that wanted to, any Tom, Dick, or Harry could have just come up and walked through there and did anything they wanted to do. Brian Albert's name was not spelled out completely in the report. He says he didn't omit Brian Albert's first name to mask that he was involved. He asked him if he knows who Colin Albert is. And he says, yes, it's Christopher Albert's son, Brian Albert's nephew. In his report, it doesn't mention that Colin was at Brian Albert's house that night. Under the persons involved section, everyone's address is listed except Brian Higgins. Do you want to take a guess what his address is listed as? Just take a wild guess. 1492 Washington Street is listed as Brian Higgins' address. That's the Canton Police Department address. He doesn't live there. Like, okay. So the report was altered after it was turned in. He says it was amended, it was added to. But the first page, like the face sheet, like the incident number, the call number, the date, the time, all of this, it's the same. Now I have to skip ahead a little bit because we had a random voir dire in the middle of his testimony. He said Lank entered the names of who he spoke to and added that to Goode's report. Lank didn't enter Brian Albert's first name, so we're going to pass the buck on that one. He shows him his report and shows him the face sheet. That's what's in the slide. The first report shown has a photo of the scene after the berm was uncovered. Remember, I told you they kicked the snow off of the berm, during the whole leaf blower thing. That's the picture that's shown on the report from January 29th. And I have a little picture of what it is. Now, the second face sheet, same report, different photo, taken in the same area, but not on the 29th. But there's nothing there to indicate that wasn't on the 29th. The picture that's on the second face sheet has this alleged piece of taillight that magically appeared there. And I'm showing you that in this picture. So he shows him this piece of taillight that was allegedly found at 34 Fairview that's included on the second face sheet. And he shows him the photo of the berm from that morning, which is right above it here. And he basically confirms, yeah, that's a different photo there. That light. We did not find that light on the 29th. The judge comments on how much of the juror's time they are taking up and says, we just need to get this case moving along. Lady, this trial has not started on time one day that I've been watching. In 3 weeks, it has not started on time. You take so many breaks and sidebars. There's more sidebars than testimony some days. I kid you not. They take extended breaks, lunch breaks, whatever. We'll wrap up early on certain days. And Tuesdays and Thursdays are only half days. Ma'am, you are wasting their time. But I digress. So he shows him the top of the face sheets, one above the other, which is what I'm showing you. Everything matches. The photos are different. Like I said, he says the taillight, not from the 29th. Never saw a piece of taillight on the 29th. He didn't change the photo, and he doesn't know who did. He wrote the report at 8:24 a.m. on January 29th. And they're arguing that it's misleading to have that photo on there, because it would indicate to anybody looking at the report that it was found on January 29th. And I completely agree. There's nothing on the face sheet or the report that says it's been amended on a different date. It doesn't say like photo added or photo changed or photo updated, whatever date. Nothing. The date still says January 29th at 8:24 a.m. Lally comes up to do his redirect, and he says that Christopher Albert was elected to town selectman after January 29th, 2022. He says that he was told that John O'Keefe was 10 to 12 feet from the property line. And then this. So he was at the address 34 Fairview, with Lank years ago regarding a hit and run investigation. So somebody hit a car that was like stopped at a light. It's stopped, it's not moving, has a woman inside. Somebody hit it and ran. Lank followed an oil spill, and it led them to the house, and Tim Albert's car was there, and it was heavily damaged. Tim Albert was charged in 2009, and then the case was dismissed after the restitution was paid. So that was kind of interesting. And he also testified that the snow got worse through the day. He says again that the narrative of the report hasn't changed. The supplemental reports have been done after the 29th and added to the report, but his narrative has stayed the same. And on this day, I have this big note because I was getting so pissed at Aunt Bev. So Lally's not making any objections. It was kind of weird, if I'm being honest. And you know, there's been, if you're on X, Twitter, or whatever you want to call it, you know, everybody's like, when she coughs or she clears her throat, then he objects, and we feel like, is that a sign? Do they have something going, you know, between them? Well, on this day, she says to Lally, do you have an objection? And then he'd be like, oh, yes, I do. Why is she telling him that he needs to be objecting? If he doesn't object, he doesn't object. That's not her job. So, I don't know. I really wish she wasn't on this case. But anyway. Then we're going to come up to Officer Lank. Now, remember I told you that we had like a random voir dire in the middle of Goode's testimony? That is because of Lank. So, let's pull him up here. This is Michael Lank. He's been with the Canton PD for 24 years and a lieutenant for 2 of those years. He oversees gun licensing and patrol. He was previously a detective sergeant and oversaw the detective bureau. So we're doing this voir dire, and it is concerning something that happened 22 years ago, in 2002. He had gone out, well, let's start with this. He knows Tim Albert, he knows Chris Albert, and he knows Brian Albert. They're all brothers. Tim Albert's the youngest brother in the family. He says he's actually closer with Chris Albert. Tim Albert's the one that got arrested for the hit and run that we just talked about. He says they've been close friends since childhood and that he has a civil relationship with Brian Albert. So the incident on August 2002. So he's off duty and he's drinking at a bar, and apparently the owner asked if he could give somebody that was a little too intoxicated, if he could give him a ride home. You know, being the great guy that he is, he says, yeah, sure, I'll take him home. When he's leaving, Chris Albert approaches him in the parking lot, and he tells him that he'd been in this physical altercation with these people earlier, and that they had threatened him and his family, and was asking him for his advice on what to do about that, asking for his advice as a police officer, which your brother is too, but whatever. So they see these guys walking towards them, Mark Lapolito and his brother Alfredo. They start coming towards them, and he's like, oh God, here they are. And he goes up and is basically like, hey guys, this is not going to happen tonight. We're not going to have a fight. He yells to the restaurant owner and the bartender, who happen to be outside, to call the Canton PD, and Canton PD show up. He kind of activates himself, I think is the word that Jackson uses, as a police officer, even though he was off duty. And he tells the Canton PD to handcuff one of the brothers. So let's see. I think it was Alfredo. Let's see. Yeah, he says that Mark hit him, so he punched him back. Mark says the complete opposite. He says Lank hit him, so he was fighting back. Mark took him to federal court in a lawsuit, and it was settled. Lank says he signed an NDA and he can't talk about it. He spit in Alfredo's face while he was in handcuffs. Alfredo was released from the scene. Mark fled. The next day, Mark shows up at the police station and he wants to file a report against Lank, and he's turned away. Charges were brought against the brothers for what they did. So he ran into the brothers at a gas station. He says he doesn't recall the exact conversation, but they threatened him. So he arrests them for witness intimidation for threatening him. They eventually are found not guilty on the assault charges, and the intimidation charges got thrown out. Then Lally brings up the investigation with Goode, leading to charges against Tim Albert. He says that he and Brian Albert have had past disagreements regarding that situation, but they're civil, like they exchange hellos and, pleasantries, whatever. So, I told you before, in this investigation, Tim fled to 34 Fairview after hitting a car. Lank follows a trail of fluid, which Goode said was oil, and they found him. It led him straight to 34 Fairview. The car is there. It's heavily damaged. He didn't do a breathalyzer on him, and there was no DUI investigation because Tim Albert said, "I'm really sorry. I panicked." So he was charged with a misdemeanor, and his record was later cleared. So Jackson is arguing that the evidence shows bias or prejudice, that it shows how long and how deep these connections go with the Alberts, and says that Lank should never have done the interviews in Brian Albert's house. Lally says there's no relevance to this at all. Any bias from 22 years ago, it's just going to confuse the jury. The judge disagrees with Lally, which really shocked me. So she says, I'll allow questioning regarding the relationships with the Alberts. She'll give him leeway on the fight incident, but they can't talk about the incident at the gas station. They can't talk about the federal lawsuit, or that the Lapolito brothers were found not guilty. And they can't talk about the animosity with Brian Albert regarding the arrest of Tim Albert. So I was prematurely excited, I guess. I mean, at least she let some of it in. But, yeah. Okay, so now let me find where we start with his testimony. Okay. So I guess when he works, he is kind of the shift sergeant. They primarily run the shift and assign officers to areas and dispatch officers. He says Sergeant Goode called him at 6:08 a.m., stating that a man was found in the snow in grave condition, and he told him it was a Boston police officer. So he went to 34 Fairview from his house because, again, he lives close, and he got there at about 6:25 a.m. When he got there, John O'Keefe is in the ambulance, and the other officers show him where John O'Keefe was found. They show him that he was 8 feet from the road. He talked to Goode first and then spoke to Jen McCabe, and you can see this on Officer Serap's cruiser dash cam. It lasted about 8 or 9 minutes. He says he saw Carrie Roberts. Doesn't recall seeing anyone else. he contacted the CPAC unit because he was made aware that it didn't look like Officer O'Keefe would survive. CPAC didn't respond. He talked to dispatch on his first call to CPAC. Then he got a return call from Trooper Proctor, who said they won't be responding. Again, we get the weather update. He says the ambulance left within 5 minutes of his arrival. After speaking with Jen McCabe, he told her he was going to need to talk to the homeowners. She said they're probably still sleeping, so he tells her basically, like, go in there and wake them up. He and Goode saw the lights come on in 34 Fairview, so they walked up the driveway and went in the main door, which that's the main door that the arrow's pointing to. Not the side door, the main door. He says that he talked to Brian and Nicole for 15 to 20 minutes. He knew that Brian was the oldest Albert brother. He's lived in Canton since he was 5 years old. He coaches youth sports. He's done that for approximately 9 to 10 years. He says he's not friends with Brian Albert. They don't really socialize. He said Albert looked disheveled, but, you know, he had just gotten woken up. He said Jen McCabe was in the house, and Brian Higgins, the ATF agent assigned to their building, he says he didn't think he saw him on his initial response, but he saw him after 9 a.m. when they went back. And that was when Jen spoke with Gallagher. He said the scene was fairly secure at all times. He observed while Gallagher used the leaf blower. He saw the blood drops and the cocktail glass in the snow. We go through the pictures of the scene again. He said he didn't have any contact with Karen Reed. He doesn't recall even seeing her. Matt McCabe arrived a couple minutes after he left the house, so he went back in to talk to him for about 5 minutes. He says he was in the house 3 times that day. Everything in the house appeared to be in order. He said the glass was put into an evidence bag, and the blood was secured in 2 solo cups, and the solo cups were secured into a brown evidence bag. Stop and shop bag. He put this in his truck and transported it to the station, and he says he put it in temporary evidence cups in the refrigerator unit. He assigned it a property number, labeled it, attached it to the report. That's all bullshit, because you can see in the picture there is no tape sealing it. There's no evidence number. There's nothing. Temporary evidence is accessible to everyone from their department. They turned it over to the state police. Then they show him this box, and he opens it with his gloves on. And immediately my thinking is, were they wearing gloves when they collected the blood drops and the glass from the scene? Like, did they even bother to wear gloves? I don't know why, because nothing was, handled correctly. But seeing him here with the gloves on, I'm like, did they wear gloves? But anyway, he puts on the gloves. He opens the box. He takes out this little brown paper bag, which is actually sealed and marked 22-870F. And voila, it's the broken drinking glass, which he's holding there to show to the jury. That is what is allegedly depicted in that picture. So Jen McCabe called the station at 9 a.m. He and Gallagher go back to Fairview. They spoke to her for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then he returned to the station. February 4th, 2022, at 8:50 a.m., Gallagher calls him and says, you need to go to 34 Fairview to meet with Chief Berkowitz because he found more evidence. Chief Berkowitz showed him a piece of red plastic in the vicinity of where John O'Keefe's body was discovered. He says he took a picture, he didn't touch it, and he called CPAC. Trooper Yuri Buchanan came to the scene and secured the item into an evidence bag. And there you see the picture that was on the second face sheet, and then there's an enlarged picture of this piece of glass that magically appeared. Berkowitz said he was driving by because the temps had increased to the mid-40s and it had rained. The snow was melting, so they could see more of the ground. Apparently, Detective Tim Taylor went with him too when he met with the chief. Let's see. Then the judge tells the jury, like, hey, you're going to hear about something that happened 22 years ago, and we go over the whole incident again. He says Tim Albert was a kid, like he was 12 and Lank was 16. They were friends until their 20s. Chris Albert was a close friend when they were younger. Then, we go into the whole fight scenario again. There were no arrests, no reports written. He says after the brother came to file the complaint and was turned away, that's when the police reports were written and filed. He filed a complaint against the two brothers, and there were no charges brought against Chris Albert about the prior altercation, and they say that this is an example of him coming to the aid of Christopher Albert in his role as a police officer. This is all stuff we've heard about before. He says the reason that he responded to the scene at 34 Fairview that morning was because he knew it was very serious. He knew it was the Albert house, and then he was the ranking officer when he arrived. We have to see the dash cams again. He's asked him to pay attention to a certain area in the upper part of one of the videos. Jen McCabe said that it was John O'Keefe's intention to join everyone at the house. He told Jen McCabe to wake her sister up. He didn't think it was inappropriate for her to interact with other witnesses. In the video, you see someone walking towards the house. It's Jen McCabe actually going into the house. He's in the video and he's on the phone. You see Kerry Roberts approach him, and he's taking a call. He says he doesn't know who the call was, but he knows that he wasn't on the phone with CPAC at that time. You see Goode walk towards him. Him and Goode walk out of frame, back into frame. Lank's pacing, still on the phone. In one of the videos, you see the SUV leaving the scene. It's Carrie and Karen. You see the lights come on, or the lights are off, and he's still on the phone. When the lights come on at 6:39, Jennifer McCabe has been in the house for approximately 3 minutes, and he has been on the phone for about 5. After Jen McCabe went in, and while he was on the phone, that's when the lights came on. At that point, the ambulance and fire department had left the scene. Kerry Roberts' SUV was gone. Karen Reed was gone. It was only the Albert family, Jen McCabe, and the Canton Police Department on the scene when the lights came on. Minutes later, he called CPAC. He indicated that he was at 34 Fairview, that John O'Keefe had traumatic injuries to his head. Medics didn't think he was going to make it. He said, I don't know if he's been in a fight or what. He never saw John O'Keefe, though. He's just going off what he was told. He said it was a chaotic scene inside the house. He went in After calling CPAC, he walked up the driveway. He thought that John O'Keefe was possibly in a fight based on what he was told. He believed the altercation could have started in the house, but honestly could have started anywhere. After speaking to the witnesses, there was no indication that John had made it into the house. He learned that from Jen McCabe. Jen McCabe gave him the timeline of events from that night where John was supposed to come back to the house but never made it. And he admits he's been lied to by a witness before, but he believes Jen McCabe. The most obvious place to find witnesses was in the house 30 feet away. He says he didn't make it past the front foyer. He never looked for evidence of a fight in the house because there was no probable cause. He didn't ask the court for a warrant because there was no probable cause. The witnesses were not asked to come outside. He didn't observe any animals. He did nothing to secure the house as a crime scene. He allowed Matt McCabe to go in the house. He didn't separate the witnesses prior to their interviews. He didn't take photos inside the house. He didn't make any diagrams or note where furniture was. He didn't note where people were sitting. He didn't know the shoe was missing until much later. He didn't search for missing clothing in the house. He knew that electronic devices were going to be vital evidence, but he didn't secure electronic devices from the occupants of the home. He didn't ask for consent to search through their phones. He never notified superiors at Canton PD regarding a conflict of interest. He didn't record the conversation with Brian Albert and Nicole Albert. Jen McCabe was within earshot of them when he interviewed them together. Got more info from Jen McCabe within earshot of Brian and Nicole Albert. Brian and Nicole Albert were both listening when Jen McCabe gave the chronological order of events of the evening. He came back at 9 a.m. Jen McCabe said she had additional information for them. Brian Albert and Nicole Albert listened to that conversation as well. When the scene was cleared around 7:50 to 7:55, after 8 a.m., the crime scene was unsecured and completely open to anyone. So they go back to talking about the red Solo cups. He collected blood in Solo cups. They're not airtight. He didn't see any dirt in the cup from the snow. He was not aware that Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab warns against collecting any biological material in anything made of plastic. He didn't do a video of scooping up the blood. He didn't document which scoop went in which cup. He put the cups in his truck he was driving, and he returned to the station. He says the blood was put in temporary evidence refrigerator. He doesn't know if they stayed in the evidence bag. He says he would have put a property label on it so everyone could see it. And then we see the picture of the Sally Port again with her car and how close all of this is to the car. He says that the Stop and Shop bag doesn't look like an evidence bag. It doesn't say Canton PD on it, but it's an evidence bag. There's no red evidence tape on the bag. There's no label on the bag. There's no property number on the bag. And he says, quote, he doesn't recall if he's ever used evidence tape in his 24 years of experience. Really? You've never collected any other evidence that needed to be marked or kept secure? So then when Lally comes back up, he allows Lank to describe in his own words the incident from 22 years ago. You know, he says that it had no relevance to his response on January 29th. He's got separate relationships with each of the Albert brothers. He goes to calls involving people he knows all the time because he grew up there and he works with these people. And we get more information about the weather. The third time at the house, he went in the side door and he stayed in the kitchen dining room area. On recross, he says He was assaulted by the Lapalito brothers in 2002. They were never convicted. And that's it for him. Now, the next one is a short one. Thank goodness. This is Charles Ray. He is a Canton Police Department lieutenant. He has been with them for 25 years, and he's been a lieutenant for 9. He's a patrol shift commander and oversees the Family Services Unit. So he found out about the 6 a.m. call and was advised by Sergeant Goode that there was an unresponsive man on Fairview, and it was a Boston police officer named John O'Keefe. He learned that Officer O'Keefe Officer O'Keefe's girlfriend was also transported to the hospital, and he was made aware that Officer O'Keefe was guardian to 2 children who may have been at home unattended since both he and his girlfriend were at the hospital. So he did a well-being check on the children at 1 Meadows Avenue, which is John O'Keefe's address. He says Chief Berkowitz may have been the one that suggested it, and Sergeant Meehan accompanied him. They knocked on doors. They kind of took a look around. They didn't get any response. They did not inspect the vehicle that was in front of them when they parked in the driveway. He learned later that the children were staying with friends and family, and they were at the house for roughly 5 to 10 minutes. These are pictures of when they pulled in. That's the ring footage from John's garage, and then the other one is the ring footage from John's front door. And that's really about it. There was no cross or anything for this guy. Okay, so thank you for bearing with me and putting up with all my coughing and my husband's coughing and the dogs and Steve and all the things. Like I said, I don't think I've ever tried to do a video when I'm this sick before. I'm going to try to do another one, but as bad as this one went, I wouldn't hold my breath. But there's no court tomorrow, so I will get more up as soon as I can. Leave me your comments because I'm very interested in what you guys think about these Canton cops. I mean, it's like this is their very first investigation, and they all have so many years of experience. It's crazy. And some of them are detectives. How can you be a detective and not know how to do an investigation? I don't know. But like I said, the Commonwealth has not proved to me yet. Nothing points to Karen Reed yet, in my opinion. You know, I've just learned that this is a very sloppy investigation. I don't know if the evidence that they collected is really going to be that reliable. All of the connections between everybody is crazy. It's like 6 degrees of separation in that town, and it all comes back to Jim McCabe, it seems like. The McCabes and the Alberts are related on X. If you see them referring to the McAlberts, it's the McCabes and the Alberts. I don't know, guys. What would it take for you to say, yes, she did it? Because I'm not there yet. I haven't seen it yet. So, like I said, leave me some comments and let me know where you're at, what you're thinking. Give this a thumbs up, please, to get it out into the algorithm. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. I promise it's not always this chaotic. And thank you for spending part of your afternoon with me. Y'all take care, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.